never believed in bad feelings before that night. I always thought they were just anxiety, your brain filling silence with imagined danger. But on a lonely stretch of Highway 50 in Nevada, I learned that your body notices things long before your mind catches up. Something about that road felt wrong long before anything actually happened. My girlfriend Haley and I were driving from Sacramento to Salt Lake City for a short weekend trip. We'd left late, missed our planned stop in Reno, and ended up pushing into the desert at night. Highway 50 is called the loneliest road in America, and it earns that name. There were no houses, no gas stations, no billboards, just black pavement stretching into nothingness. The sky felt huge, and the dark felt thick, like it was pressing against the car. Haley had fallen asleep with her hoodie pulled over her face. I was alone with the road and the soft glow of the dashboard. That's when I noticed headlights behind us. They were far back at first, just two small white dots floating in the distance. At first, it was comforting, proof that we weren't alone out here. But after a while, something about them started to feel off. They weren't getting closer, and they weren't falling back. No matter how fast or slow I went, they stayed in exactly the same place in my mirror. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The headlights never moved. When Haley woke up, she noticed them right away. She said it was nice knowing another person was out there. I wanted to agree, but a knot had already formed in my stomach. On an empty highway like that, anyone behind you should eventually pass. This car didn't. Not long after, our cell service dropped. The radio faded into static and then silence. The desert swallowed every sound except the tires and the wind. Then Haley's phone made a quiet clicking noise. A voicemail had come through even though we had no signal. She played it, laughing nervously, until a man's voice came through the speaker. He was breathing heavily at first. Then he said calmly, "I can see you now." We stared at each other in disbelief. Haley checked the number, but it didn't show anything, just unknown. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed with another voicemail. It was the same man. "Now you're looking at your phone. Good. Keep your eyes down. It makes this easier." My heart started racing. I hadn't told Haley what I was doing. Neither had she. The car behind us was still there, matching our speed perfectly. I pressed the accelerator, but the headlights didn't fall back. They stayed locked in place. More voicemails came in, one after another, on both our phones. We stopped opening them, but we didn't need to. The man was clearly watching us. Somehow, he knew everything we were doing inside that car. Haley noticed something that made her start crying. The headlights behind us weren't bouncing like they should on the uneven road. They were completely steady, like they weren't attached to anything at all. That's when the message preview appeared on my phone. "I don't need the headlights anymore." The lights behind us went out. For a few seconds, we were completely alone in the dark. Then the headlights snapped back on, much closer than before. I could see the outline of something behind us now, but it didn't look right. It was too tall, too thin, like something pretending to be a car. Another message appeared. "I can open your doors when I'm this close." We locked the doors. A second later, they unlocked by themselves. We locked them again. They unlocked again. Haley was crying uncontrollably now. Then she whispered something that made my blood freeze. "There's someone in the back seat." I didn't turn around. Couldn't. My phone buzzed one last time, and the message preview read, "I told you I could see you." The next thing I remember, we were at a gas station miles away, screaming for help. The police never found another vehicle, no tire tracks, no phone records. There was no explanation. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I still see two headlights sitting perfectly still in my mirror, waiting for me to slow down. never picked up a hitchhiker before. Not because I thought it was dangerous, I just never had the opportunity. That changed the night I drove from Denver to Albuquerque, and I'll never forget the way that decision nearly cost me everything. It was around 9 p.m., and I had left Denver later than planned. The highway stretched out before me, lit only by my headlights and the occasional blinking sign. I'd been driving for hours, music playing softly, when I saw him. A young man, maybe early 20s, standing on the shoulder with his thumb out. His clothes were simple, faded jeans and a hoodie, and he had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't look threatening, just tired, cold, and desperate. Something about him made me hesitate, but I pulled over anyway. He climbed in without a word and offered a quick, nervous smile. "Thanks," he said. His voice was soft but steady, almost too calm. I asked where he was headed. He gave me the name of a small town about 90 miles away. I nodded and pulled back onto the road. At first, the ride was quiet, just the hum of the tires on the asphalt. But after a few minutes, he started asking questions about me, personal questions. Where I was from, why I was driving so late, whether I lived alone. I told myself he was just trying to make conversation. But then the questions got specific. Too specific. "You live alone, right? In that house off Elm Street?" he asked, naming my exact address. My stomach dropped. I laughed nervously. "Yeah. How did you?" He didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead, eyes locked on the road as if he could see through me. The silence that followed was suffocating. I tried to change the subject, talking about the drive, the weather, the radio, but he would always steer it back to me, back to my life, my routines. "Do you keep your doors locked at night?" he asked suddenly. I shrugged. "Sometimes." He smiled faintly, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. That smile wasn't friendly. It was calculating. As we drove deeper into the night, I noticed we hadn't passed another car in nearly an hour. The highway was empty, pitch black, and the trees on either side felt like they were pressing closer. I started feeling trapped, like I had made a mistake stopping for him. I considered turning around, but the road curved in a way that made it impossible to see much behind me, and my instincts told me he wouldn't like that. Then he said something that froze me completely. "Do you remember last summer? The night you thought someone was in your backyard?" I swallowed hard. My eyes darted to the dark fields beside the road. Nobody had been there. How could he know? My hands tightened on the wheel. I don't know what you mean," I said. He leaned back slightly, almost casual. "I was there, watching. I didn't touch anything, don't worry. I just watched, and I remember everything. I can tell if you're telling the truth or not." I laughed, nervously this time, trying to make light of it. "Okay, this is a joke, right?" But he didn't laugh. He just sat there, calm and still, like he had all the time in the world to see me unravel. I tried to convince myself it was a bluff. Maybe he was exaggerating, trying to scare me. But deep down, I knew he wasn't. I thought about stopping at the next exit, calling the police, anything. But every time I slowed down or hesitated, he would lean forward slightly and fix me with that unnerving stare. "Don't slow down," he said quietly. "It makes it worse." The miles dragged on. My heart was hammering so hard I thought he could hear it. Every shadow along the road, every flash of deer eyes in my headlights made me jump. I didn't know what he was capable of, but I knew it wasn't good. He had access to my life, my routines, even my fears, and I couldn't escape him. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw the dim lights of the small town ahead. Relief flooded me. I prepared to tell him to get out, to never speak to me again. But when I glanced in the rearview mirror, the seat was empty. No duffel bag. Nothing. The door hadn't opened. I didn't remember him getting out. That I parked in a lot, shaking, trying to convince myself it had all been a hallucination. But then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Nice drive. We'll do it again sometime. Sleep well." I never told anyone about that night. I never saw him again. But now, years later, whenever I'm driving alone at night, I find myself checking the rearview mirror far too often, always half expecting to see him sitting there, calm, quiet, knowing too much. It started as a normal road trip. My two friends, Jake and Melissa, and I were driving from Phoenix to Portland, taking the scenic route through Northern California. We weren't in any hurry, just crisscrossing highways, stopping when we felt like it, staying wherever looked cheap and safe. It was the kind of trip you take when you want freedom, when you want the world to feel small and manageable. By the second night, we were exhausted. The sun had set hours ago, and the only thing between us and total fatigue was a tiny motel just off the highway in Redding. It was nothing fancy. One of those neon signs that flicker with age, a little paint peeling on the doors, but it was clean, and the clerk was friendly enough. We took rooms across the hall from each other. Jake and Melissa in one, me in the other. I remember thinking at the time that I had a good feeling about this place. I fell asleep quickly, as soon as my head hit the pillow. Around 2 a.m., though, I woke up to a faint sound. At first, I couldn't place it. Maybe the air conditioning, maybe the highway, but then I realized it was coming from across the hall. The door of the room directly opposite mine was slightly ajar. A soft light glowed through the crack, and I could hear something. Low, uneven breathing. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe someone was asleep with the TV on. Maybe the neighbor was just restless. But there was a rhythm to the breathing, a pacing. It wasn't natural. And then the doorknob started to jiggle. Just a little at first. Not enough to open, but enough to make my stomach drop. I debated calling the front desk. But my phone was dead. I didn't want to wake Jake and Melissa and seem crazy, but I also didn't want to do nothing. I sat up in bed, straining to hear, and that's when I noticed it. Shadows moving behind the curtain of the open door. Not a human silhouette exactly, just something shifting, like someone was standing there, swaying slightly. I froze. My mind raced. What do you do in that situation? You can't see their face, can't even see their body clearly, but you know someone is there. You know they're watching. And then I heard it. A whisper. So low I barely registered it. "Are you awake?" I almost screamed. My first thought was that it was a guest in the other room, messing around. But the voice, it wasn't. It was familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. Familiar, but wrong. I grabbed my phone, shaking, and finally managed to dial Jake. I whispered into the line, explaining what I'd seen. He laughed it off. "Dude, you're imagining things. Go back to sleep." But I couldn't. Every creak of the floorboards across the hall made me tense. Every shift of shadow made me flinch. And then I heard movement in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. Footsteps. Not hurried. Not panicked. Just approaching. I wanted to run. I wanted to throw open the door and get out. But I was trapped. The hallway was empty. The lights outside the rooms flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed alive. The steps stopped at my door. Then nothing. Absolute silence. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours. Eventually, the light across the hall went out. The breathing stopped. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I told Jake and Melissa what happened. They didn't take me seriously at first, until the motel clerk stopped by, looking nervous. "You should have called us last night," he said quietly. "The guy who was in that room, he doesn't usually leave." I asked what he meant. He explained that the room had been booked by a man who had a record of staying in motels and watching people. Security cameras had caught him walking the halls at night, peering into rooms, sometimes opening doors when people were asleep. Nobody knew how long he had been in our motel. Nobody knew exactly what he had been planning. We checked out immediately. I never looked back. But even now, months later, I remember every detail. The way the door shifted, the breathing that didn't belong, the whisper that froze me in place. And every time I stay in a hotel or motel, I can't help checking the opposite door, watching for the shadow, listening for the soft, uneven breathing that makes your skin crawl. Some things you never forget. Some things don't go away. And the hallway across from mine that night, I think about it almost every time I travel. Because I know somewhere, someone could be doing the exact same thing. Watching, waiting, knowing you're asleep on the other side of the wall.